Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. I done kept it real from the jump. I done kept it real from the jump. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. Started from the bottom, now we. I done kept it real from the. I done kept it real from the jump. Living at my mama house, we argue every month, nigga. I done kept it real from the jump. Living at my mama house, we argue every month, nigga. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. I done kept it real from the jump. I done kept it real. I done kept it real from the jump.
Yeah. This is for all you non-philosophizing black sheep, unwelcome, pushed to the side motherfuckers like me.
Fuck what they say. TANG gang, Atheist Your Way. Yeah. Fuck what they say. TANG gang, Atheist Your Way. Ha ha ha. Let's get down to business. These bitches got glitches. And you thought you'd dismiss us? Nah. Now I'm laughing in stitches. See, the problem be, it'll be a tragic travesty to come after me. So just know this is how we get down. Respect that shit like a pronoun, bitch. Yeah. Fuck what they say. TANG gang, Atheist Your Way. Yeah. And fuck what they say. TANG gang, Atheist Your Way. Yeah. Fuck what they say. TANG gang, Atheist Your Way. Yeah. Fuck what they say. TANG gang, Atheist Your Way.
Wow, that intro always makes me want to like go to a protest or a club. I can't figure out which one.
I really hope that it makes it onto album 2 somehow. Maybe get another verse. Just make it work because I love it.
Well, that's going to be on the. Oh, okay. I see. All right. Ger's starting early. Heckling from the cheap seats. No, everybody, welcome to another show. I'm here with Dr. Joshua Bowen, the man, the myth. And we have kind of a different show tonight, don't we, Josh?
Yeah. It's you know what? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
Right. Well, so quick introduction. I hope you've had a good week or several weeks since our last show. I know you've been busy, as have I. We've had scheduling conflicts. We apologize to the audience. We're trying to get this thing, kick the tires, get this car moving, but sometimes other commitments seem to take precedent.
Sickness.
Josh was sick. We both have parenting responsibilities, so there's all that going on. So why is this show tonight going to be what it is, which is how do you find things we need to find it? Because Josh and I are often asked by people, hey, I'd really like to research this more. How do I do it? And Josh, much like myself, often will go, don't worry, I'll pull that paper up for you and send it to you in an email. And then we get kind of inundated. And not that we don't like doing it, but if we could give some members of our audience like a little bit of a few clues on where they could do some of this stuff themselves, maybe they would be better researchers and better skeptics and scholars and undertake a lot of this research on their own. So tonight we're going to kind of try to guide you that way and show you some basic techniques that might help you out.
I mean, like I would say from a research perspective, for me anyway, that was the fundamental thing that I took away from my doctoral program. And Pat, I'm sure that where you are, like it's, if you can get the skill, develop the researching skill That's half the battle. The other half is learning what the reputable sources are. So when you go to a different field, it can be very difficult to say, right off the bat, whom can I trust? What journal articles, or who are the individuals in this series that I can really rely on. But if you can hammer down those two things,
you're in good shape.
Yeah, you really can do a lot. So
the other one I like to point people to is, where can I find free stuff? Like, if you don't have access to an academic digital library, like through a major university, you're going to be kind of hurting as well. But there are kind of free ways to do it. That's what we'll talk about tonight. How can I get a lot of good information, a lot of good references without phoning a friend? I don't have to type digital Hammurabi, because I could do it on my own.
Yeah.
And you could do it pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then I think some people will be amazed how accessible some of this stuff is through some of the major, and a little cheater, some of the major venues that Josh and I go to. I'm going to give you my inside secrets on how, when I initially research stuff now, besides just getting into JSTOR and all the hard academic search engines where you just pull up article after article after article, sometimes you can get around a subject and get a lot of major hits and major references without ever going into a library. You can just do it all online and get a lot of good information relatively easily and for free. And free is good.
And I mean, academia, I think, is making a good move toward making things digitally accessible.
Right.
So, like, when we talk about some of the topics tonight, I've got a book sitting here that I get the paper copy because it works so much better for me. But you don't need it; you can get it online. And a seriological, the people that put them together have the publishers have made them accessible. So,
right, and free is good, and digital's good if you can't afford hard copies, because hard copies tend to be cost prohibitive. I don't want to tell what grad schools cost when you start buying hard copies. That's the only way you can do it. But people go, well, how much you spend a year on books? I go, you don't even want to know.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
You don't want to know. So let's go ahead and jump into this. I have a quick little thing, and I don't want to take too much time. So, that was fast. So this is the Met Museum. I send my students here, so sorry, bear with me. You're going to get a little bit of Professor Pat right now. But how do I send people, particularly like first-year college students who may already got some skills in a library, but they want to research something really fast? And how can I do this at home? And how can I do it as someone who's an interested person who wants to get more information, particularly on the stuff Josh and I talk about? Ancient history, archaeology. He's going to be an Assyriologist tonight, whatever that is. But like, how do you go? Well, you go to the Met, metmuseum.org. The great thing about the Met is it's a very good digital source. Now, the British Museum, Boston Museum of Fine Arts, there's all kinds of places you can go for this information. I just go to the Met because I happen to know a couple people that work there, and so when I need something behind the scenes, I can call. But all these museums are great, but there are museums that aren't as accessible, like the Getty. Like, you just can't pull an image off the Getty for free most of the time, or some museums are a little less accessible than others. So your ease of use will vary, but most of them are still good digital archives now. And this will give you a lot of entry-level information, as well as some pretty advanced scholarship all in one source, particularly like the Met. So where do you start? Well, you go to the homepage of the Met, and that's metmuseum.org. And you want to look up something, you go over to where it says search, and it's a little red arrow. And we click that search bar, you punch in anything you're interested in searching for. Now, this is kind of a demonstration, so I filled everything in for you. But you want to search Greek vases, because you're not an expert in, the different forms, the different styles, all the different, terminology that archaeologists and historians use when they're describing this stuff. So you're like, hey, I want to look at some Greek vases. Problem is, you're going to get nearly 20,000 hits. This is an example I use in class. And you'll notice below search results, it'll say all results, art. Art's typically less than all results, because the great thing about the Met is they have a lot of free publications. that'll describe the different styles of vases. So what you want to do typically is go down to the advanced collection search button and click that. And what that'll let you do is move through to a bunch of filters. Now you can pick the type of vase you want or the material the vase is made out of. The next box over is location. I put Greece. Then you pick the next box over is time period, department if you want it from a particular area of the museum. These are really good. Also, you can click things like highlights, the ones that are the most popular. I usually click artwork with image. So when I'm looking at it, I can actually look at the piece online. You can click artworks on display. These are things currently on display at the Met. So you could research before you actually go to the Met, the pieces you might want to look at if you're like interested scholar on certain things. Open access just means it's something that you're free to write on your own. And then there's always the Nazi era stuff that is in collections, because they typically let you know now stuff that is questionable, particularly stuff that was stolen and there's some disputed ownership at this point in time. And so what you'll do is you'll get search results. So if you narrow down the type of vase you want to craters, it's a type of Greek vase, kind of a jug looking thing, for lack of a better term. You put those search engines in between 1000 BC and 1 AD. You'll get a little over 1100 search results. That's still a lot. Now you can painstakingly go through all this stuff and just kind of learn about Greek vases in general, and particularly this type, what a crater is and things like that. But you're going to want to, again, if you're trying to do a project, you might want to narrow down a little bit. So let's say you're interested in Hercules, right? So, first you want to narrow down the region. So you don't want to study about Greek vases in Greece. You want to study about Greek vases or craters that were found in Italy. So you change the search parameter to Italy. Now you're down to 24 Greek craters that were found in Italy. Might be a little more descriptive for what you're looking for, right? You can start doing some narrowing down of regions, particularly like in Greece. You can go to different territories like the Peloponnese. You can put, there are some other defining characteristics there, so you can narrow down that. But it's just basic search engine stuff. But let's say, for example, you have a theme, not necessarily a region, but a theme. Like you want to look about any depiction of Heracles, because you're doing a research paper on half human gods that are later achieved divinity through apotheosis. Let's just say that's your search parameter, because you're writing a book about men that used to be human that turn into gods. And so you'll highlight that. You get 38 results with all those search criteria in there. And now you've taken, again, Greek vases. We started off with nearly 20,000 hits. You've narrowed it down to craters, a specific type of Greek vase, for lack of a better term, usually made of terracotta. And because of what's themed, what's depicted on it, you're now narrowed it down to 38 results. This is kind of how these systems look. And every one of these pictures is going to have a lot of information. Each one of these results is a lot of useful information for you. So just bear with me and it's all going to make sense. You click on one of these 38 items and you'll notice there's a pretty lengthy description. The Met gives typically a couple hundred words description on just the item, how it came in their collection, description, and there's a read more section, which gets you anywhere from 3 to 5 to sometimes 7 paragraphs talking about what's being depicted in the picture, what these type of objects, in this case these craters, were used for. This is craters are a mixing bowl, formal, like kind of ceremonial mixing of bowl for mixing of wine and water for drinking, for everyday use. But typically the nicer end ones were used in symposium, where people sat down for like formal banquets and hanging out and chatting it up and talking politics. But then you could look at the theme. In this picture, Heracles is being depicted, but even this piece is unique and tells you a little about, this is in the center of this piece is a statue of Heracles, actually of a pigment application known as encaustic, the encaustic method of applying pigment to a statue that we don't even know how they did it. So it goes in, it gives you a lot of information, but a basic perusal, this is quite a bit of information on this piece. And you may just want to stop there and not go on any further, because you just want to learn generally some stuff about these kind of things. But you want to do a deep dive because you're all into it. Well, every entry at the Met and museums in general typically have all of the details. What's it made of? Is there any attributed artist? Sometimes they know who in Greece created this piece. late period, give you the best date, give you the cultures associated with it. So some of those regional searches can be more narrow. The dimensions. And important is the accession number. This is the number that the museum uses to track the piece. More important than any of that I just talked to you about is the reference section. Now, this is where 90% of someone else did the work for you. Getting all these references together are huge. Now, you'll notice that the first entrance here, and I don't necessarily like the way the Met does it, the Met starts with the oldest scholarship first, okay, on file. And they start with a PhD dissertation, and Josh can tell you that's no small that's no small piece of paper, by Phyllis Lehman in 1946. Statues on coins of southern Italy and Sicily in the classical period, right? And she did that from New York University. This particular piece and the Met's reference section has 63 references. I put the first 5, which are the oldest, and the last 5. But also included this is a 1988 dissertation from, oh man, I'm doing off the top of my head. I shouldn't have done that. I believe it, well, there's someone who did their, from a pretty established, it might be Oxford dissertation, where they talk about divine imagery of Heracles. So everything about Heracles in someone's dissertation, they use this piece. And so there's a lot of information out there on how this piece was used in that analysis and things like that. So there's a lot there, but there are 63 references, everything from kind of just one pagers that ended up in like some magazine somewhere to like the Met's own journal articles. But if you really want to learn about this piece and some of the themes that this piece was used to describe, again, divine imagery in Greek religious studies, right? Like how did the average painter or craftsman represent the divine imagery on, particularly terracotta vases, right? You can learn a lot. You can learn about how did they paint this and why they paint it this way. Some of it's about the manufacturing techniques, wide variety of references. But every time this piece is mentioned, it's in this reference section as far as the Met's able to track it down. A lot of information. And we could stop there. But there's 63 references in here. And you can just scroll down and look through these and go, okay, which ones make sense for what I'm interested in learning about? And some of these, particularly if they are the Met's publications, guess what? They're free. You just either, if it's not on file, you email the Met and say, hey, I found this piece. Can you send me a PDF? And they'll send you a PDF. Some of them are in out-of-print magazines. You may have to drop them into some search engines, but this gives you a huge amount of information. 63 references on a piece of art. Now, if you're looking at all of the Met's collections, depictions of Heracles, I'm going to tell you, you're going to end up with a couple hundred references. But if you're doing a deep dive, this is how you start it. And you'll see some of this will overlap. Some of these references will appear multiple times because they took a wide selection of pieces at the Met. But this is kind of a really good place to start, particularly for those people who are kind of entry-level researchers who don't have access to a university style or like JSTOR paid search system. This is a really good place to start because a lot of this stuff's free, and it's the ending. Always start at the end with the most current scholarship, and I work backwards when it's the Met collection. Other places do it different ways, but that's how I do it.
And I want to take a second to point something out here, because you've mentioned it twice about the way these sources are listed. Sorry, still at the tail end of this flu thing. There was a tweet earlier this week. If you follow me, you'll know who it was from, but I won't mention their name here. But they said something like, it's not always like beneficial to read broadly on a topic. Like there is benefit to it, but like there's a certain point where it stops being beneficial. And the way that the tweet was written, it was like it was against reading widely on a particular topic. And of course I retweeted it because the individual that wrote it, I said this explains a lot. But the reason that I want to bring that up here is that, Pat pointed out that he doesn't like that they put the oldest scholarship first or at the top. And this is a problem for a lot of people. Somebody that you've debated recently, for example, and a lot of people online, they're not paying attention to things like when was such and such article written. And a lot of times what they'll do is the first thing that they come across, be it in a Google search engine or, even here, if they make it to something like this, they'll just look up the first thing and they'll say, boy, that agrees with me. And they're done. Right. Who cares if it was written in 1946? Right. And in certain fields, a lot can change. In Assyriology, for example, from 1946, oh my God. Fields that have been around a lot longer, maybe not such a great gap, but certainly you don't want to rely on the, stuff from the 40s. If things have been written more recently. So, yes, this is the other nice thing. If you get a work, even an article, if it's dedicated to a particular, one specific thing that you're working on, there usually or very often will be sort of a history of research section of the paper. What have people said to date about this? So if you have a monograph, right, if you have an actual book that's written about that topic, definitely going to be a chapter dedicated to what has everybody said up to this point, because part of writing something new is making sure you don't write something that somebody's already written, because you don't want to get to the end and have your advisor say, didn't you read Smith from 1963? He came up with this idea and it's been, oh shit. So yes,
I've done that already once. So
yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
haven't we all?
Yeah. But this is the other thing, like that status of scholarship. That's typically how when you're talking to other people in the field, what's the status of scholarship on this topic, right? That's usually chapter 1 or 2. It's either an introduction to the field, and then this is where we're at today, or this is where we're at today, and so let me introduce you to the field. Like, it needs to be done early in a writing, because people, like, I want to know who you cited, and how you got to this opinion, and it's pretty common. So, like, I'm not here to like teach everybody advanced research methods, but you can go to, like, Josh is talking about stuff that we'll talk about tonight. Some of it's in the actual Met collection, has either one copy of it, or in some cases it's on loan from another museum or something like that, or it was on loan at one time, so they have extremely good digital archives of the material. But like, when you talk about like certain characters in history or certain texts, and we go, oh, by the way, go look at one of those because it's at the Met Museum. And then you read all about it. And now you go, wait a minute. So when a Christian apologist, we weren't going to mention that, but when someone's doing bad scholarship, you can go, yeah, but if you actually looked at this one at the Met, and you're done.
Yeah. See, this is really, it's not magic, right? So we're going to be looking at 5 things tonight if we get to all of them. And some of the things that I looked at tonight, I mean, I haven't looked at since I studied my comprehensive exams. That would have been back in 2012. So it's not like I just had Lamassu fresh in my mind. And so, but the thing is, knowing which resource to go to as your jumping off point. So that's what you want to know, is you want to know, okay, I'm looking at this type, and I'm looking at ancient Near Eastern art. What's a good reference to start with? Right? Those are the types of things that you want to know, because once you get there, then you can start your deep dive. And in the nice thing is, in biblical studies, that's really easy. And I can explain, why as we get there. But it's an important thing.
That's why I like about, like, I think of Greek and Roman studies as like kind of a sharp incline down a hill, and biblical studies is a cliff into jagged rocks.
It's just, when you have something like biblical studies, it's been written on ad nauseum, right? So, and so many people are interested in it. So that means there are good resources that are available. Whereas with something like Assyriology, even though it's far more fascinating, I feel comfortable saying that, it hasn't been written on to death because it's a much newer field. So we don't have all these resources that are out there yet.
Yeah,
So
like the emerging field of Anatolian studies. I mean, they're getting their own regional references now. It's like not just the Hittites, right? It's way more than that. So I typically teach what we're doing tonight. We're going to jump in. We're going to look at 5 pieces from the Metz collection that have to do with, if you typed in the keyword Assyriology or Assyria, it was Assyria. And they're just some pieces that popped up. And so I threw them in the thing like one at a time. Josh was like, I can talk about that. 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 Because this is kind of how you would do your own research, by the way, if you were just interested in ancient Assyria and you've heard Josh talk ad nauseum at extremely lengthy times about all these biblical characters, but you want to see some of these when he talks about, oh, we have an inscription from this guy at this time. Do we? And then you can actually look at the museum where it's located and go in and read the authoritative translation and go, Josh is 100% correct. And all that other stuff I was told by other people, this is the mainstream scholarship. Something about museums, I'm not saying it's always the case, but there's painstaking detail taken to make sure that it represents the both bookends of scholarship, but is heavily reinforced in the middle. So you get the centrist view with a little bit of the outlying as well. You don't get the extremely crazy, this shit happened on another planet scholarship. But you get these are some of the minority viewpoints, but this is the consensus scholarship. And it's typically within a museum study and how they reference these materials as well. So let's jump in the first one.
sounds
If
good.
Jena can throw it back up. Oops. Sorry. Yep. This piece. Woohoo.
Okay. So if you want to introduce it.
So this is the Met collection. This piece is a session number 32.143.4. It's a gypsum alabaster relief from the Neo-Syrian Empire, dated to 833 to 859 from Nimrod, and there is a lengthy, about 600-word introductory paragraph here, but this is a relief from the palace of the Assyrian king Ashurnasirpal. He depicts him and one of his attendants. Any more information you want me to give them that? Or
No, that's good.
Okay.
There's an infinite number of things that could be said about this, and there's another section to that relief, and of course, there's more than just that piece there. If you're interested in, for example, somebody asked me the other day, it was Skylar actually, he texted me a TikTok video that that if you look, in fact, it might be on, I don't know if you have the other slide from the medal in there, but they're watering the tree of life, I think, in that second relief.
I can pull it up, right?
It's okay. It's okay. But there's this little bucket that they hold, and there's like looks like a pine cone. It's a sponge of some sort, and they dip it in, and then they water the tree, right? Well, some guy has found another relief, like in South America or something, that looks like it has a similar bucket, and so the conclusion is aliens, right? Okay,
exactly. I mean, it makes sense to me.
So
not that sponges are naturally occurring in regions where there's water, but never mind.
So there are lots of different things, and I have no expertise in surprise, in ancient Near Eastern art. It is a subfield in ancient Near Eastern studies. If you're interested, I have friends that do it. But there are so many things that you could talk about. The iconography, looking at the different positions that the figures are in, or the clothing that they wear, or the weapons that they have, all this stuff. There are different symbols. If you're interested in something like this, this is a ancient Near Eastern art. A work like this is actually really, really useful because it gives you a good introduction to what are all these different symbols, right? What do these things mean? And of course, Coalson is very well known. But so I'm not going to go through all the different, because I couldn't, right? It would take me far too long to do the research into the nuances here. But there are a couple things that I want to point out, because you mentioned Ashurnasirpal II. There is an ancient Near Eastern art specialist named Irene Winter. I think she's retired now, but
I think we have some of her stuff.
yeah. And if you want to put that article up, that PDF up, that's great. It's not necessary. But Ashurnasirpal II, in the first millennium, new Assyrian king, one of the things that he did is he built this palace. And kings did this sort of thing and did expansionistic, building projects when they were, being very successful. And they were, able to bring tribute in, and so they could bring workers and money and all these things, so they could really build extravagant things. But one of the things that they did, one of the things that Ashurnasirpal did, is he created this throne room. And the throne room is set up with these, I think they're called orthostats, but these these reliefs, and they're in the British Museum. They're everywhere, right? There's a whole bunch of them. There was one for a while there might still be one there in Virginia Theological Seminary. Like you could go down and look at it. But if you look closely at the screen, you'll see right about waist height and a little lower, that's an inscription, right? That's cuneiform. And in Ashurnasirpal II's throne room, there's a thing called the standard inscription. And my friend from Hopkins, Caleb Howard, wrote his dissertation on the standard inscription and these orthostats. And but it's everywhere, right? It shows up everywhere. But one of the things that Irene Winter did is she drew out, put pictures of all these different scenes up. Many of them are very violent, and then laid them out as they would have been in the throne room, in the palace, as you'd enter the throne room. And she called it the program. And as a person would come in, they'd sort of go through almost like a movie reel, and they'd walk by these scenes, and it would depict the power of the king. It would depict the violence of the king. It would depict the presence of the king, so much so that if somebody from a foreign country were to come and they would be so terrified and in awe of the king and of Assyria because of the way this throne room was set up. That was the idea. And this, of course, Ashurnasirpal II is not the only person that did this sort of thing. You can see this sort of thing in the Hittite Empire, but and other places, obviously. But that was just the first one I thought of. But these are really important for telling that story to the visitor. And so that's, if you go to like the British Museum, if you go to the Met, you can, and again, lots of other places, you can see these scenes, and you'll see that inscription. And Irene Winter goes through this entire article talking about what that experience would have been like in her estimation. So that's a really interesting aspect to this. So that's how these things are often used. It's not just pretty art, right? They had a definite purpose.
It's everything from propaganda to divine imagery, and it is a statement not only of power but of desired interaction.
Yeah.
If everybody that is getting their head cut off looks like the land from the people that you just came from,
yep,
usually you kind of mellow out a little bit.
Yeah.
This is Sparta.
It's like it's fuck around and find out, but in a graphic form,
right? In diplomatic language. Yeah, and I do think that's another thing too. Is like, I know some of the audience may not care, but when we look at tablets like these are reliefs, but you see the cuneiform in there, understanding that these texts are very important because it helps us, date things. It talks about events, contemporaneous. So when you find two texts that are identical, talking about the same events, then you know that this king from this city had the same inscription done at another city in order to, again, project power. And if it's like, it may be slightly different because it says after I conquered this city, and then the inscription continues like it would have been somewhere else, right? Like some of these things are like sometimes you got to piece together, but the cuneiform is really important because it survived.
Yeah,
this piece is 3,000 years old. It just letting people understand the reference in time and scale,
and that's young from an Assyriological standpoint. That's young. I mean, we have text from 5,100 years ago.
Right.
So
but this is all written down in the 10th century BCE, right?
This would have been the 9th. But
9th
yeah,
century.
yeah.
Okay. 9th century BCE, fully literate society, keeping contemporaneous records. I just want to point it out for those that may be familiar with another budding, rising little piece of property in the region. So with almost nothing written down. Right. Okay. Let's look at the next one because this is all fun.
Awesome. This is my favorite.
That's why I put it up there.
Of all of them that you asked me to write about, just because it's the most fun. So I don't know if you want to introduce it or you want me to. It doesn't matter.
Well, no, I think you should because this is an awesome piece.
Okay, so there is a period of time in the 14th century that's called the Amarna period, and I think that text.
You want me to actually pull up which one it is?
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to think of how to tell the story here. So I wrote about it in volume 1 of the Atheist Handbook, the Amarna period. But essentially, this is a time that we found a group of tablets, 300 plus tablets, and they were found in Egypt at the site of Tel El Amarna, and they have two types of letters were found at this city. One are letters between the Pharaoh of Egypt, Akhenaten, primarily, and his vassals that were in the land of Canaan, in the southern Levant. Canaan,
where we heard that? Never mind.
Yeah, I don't know where it is. It's not important. But so their letters basically that's the bulk of them, right? The letters that are coming from Canaanite vassals, these petty kings that are saying things like, "Hey, this other king over here in the next city, he doesn't like you very much and he's rebellious, but I'm really faithful to you, but he's trying to pick on me. Could you send me some troops to help me?" You know, that sort of thing. But there's a group, a much smaller group, I think of 15 texts, maybe 18, I can't remember, that are letters that are from, to and from the major powers, the kings that are in of the major powers in the region, including Babylonia and, as we'll see here, Assyria. And it's called the Great Powers Club. That's what they've named it today. But it's these kings writing these letters back and forth. And some of the things that they do when they write these letters, and you can read them. William Moran did he did a translation of all. There might be something more recent, but that's usually the standard one. William Moran's the Amarna letters. It's from early 90s, 92, I think. But they're all in English translation with a little bit of commentary. And they write things like, they send these greeting gifts back and forth to one another. And they'll say things to one another like, "Hey, the gold statue that you sent me, I melted it down. It was mostly wood, and gold in your land is like dirt, right? So why are you being stingy, right? Send me a better greeting gift next time." Or, "Hey, I was sick last month. How come you didn't come visit me when I was sick?" So that's the sort of, they use this familial phrase or the familial language. So they refer to each other as brother. in these letters. But this one's funny because it's written from the Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal. And
I think it's funny.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because Ashurbanipal at this point, okay, there was a major dark age that took place in southern Mesopotamia right around 1600 BCE. Then things started to build back up in Babylonia, but Assyria was still pretty weak, right, during the middle of the second millennium. Nice. But as they started, as these nations did, as they got a little stronger, they would start to expand their influence outward, right? And so what happens is Assyria up to this point has sort of been under the thumb of Babylonia in the south, Assyria in the north. But Assyria is starting to get a little stronger. And so what we get in this letter, and I've got the English translation of it here.
Okay, cool. But it is available, just so you know, if you go to the Met, they have all this.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So this is the letter from Ashurbanipal, the king of Assyria, to the Pharaoh. And here's what he says. Say to the king of Egypt. So they would send a messenger to read the tablet out loud. So say to the king of Egypt, thus Ashurbanipal, the king of Assyria, for you, your household, for your country, for your chariots, your troops, may all go well. This is very standard introductory language for these letters. I send my messenger to you to visit you and to visit your country. Up to now, my predecessors have not written. Today, I write to you. I send you a beautiful chariot, 2 horses, and blah, 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 blah. Do not delay the messenger whom I send to you for a visit. He should visit and then leave for here. He should see what you are like and what your country is like, and then leave for here. So it's a short letter, relatively speaking. But Ashurbanipal is sending this letter to the king of Egypt, and he is essentially inserting himself into this great powers club. So it'd sort of be like, if you had if you were a CEO and you had somebody working for you, and all of a sudden he sits down at your poker table with the other CEOs and is like, "Hey, what's up? Deal me in." Right? That's sort of what's going on here. So we have this other letter from the king of Babylonia. I'll read it to you. His name is Bernaburiash. And he writes to the king of Egypt and, has some things to say. But then he gets down to the latter part of the letter and he said, now, as for my Assyrian vassal, I was not the one who sent them to you. Why, on their own authority, have they come to your country? If you love me, they will conduct no business whatsoever. Send them off to me empty-handed. In other words, Bernaburiash is pissed that his vassal has the audacity to write this letter and send a messenger off to insert himself in this way. And so you get this like real time interplay, this jealousy, this is back and forth in written form that's sort of uncut in a lot of ways. So it's what makes this stuff really interesting.
Well, and that's actually a fascinating exchange because Assyria is going, we're strong enough now to send this diplomatic message. And by doing it, they're giving a finger to the South. Yep. At the same time, the South is saying, wait, we have to make it look like we're still in control when they're not. Militarily, they don't have the power to project into the region anymore. And they're basically, Assyria's independent.
Yeah.
Even though, 100 years ago, they weren't, right? There was a vassalage, but now there isn't. And it's a big finger. It's kind of like if, there was a country in North America that was a colony from another place that sent a big letter called the Declaration of something that We don't follow your shit no more. I mean, in a way, that's kind of what this is, though. It's kind of a parallel. Instead of sending it to the Southern Kingdom, you know, they send it to a third party. It's like, you know, like France maybe, and saying, "Hey, we're our own country."
And this is why there's a reason that this sort of thing is so important. And we're going to see this actually in one of the when we get to Sennacherib's prism. Mm-hmm. These countries, I mean, it's, you know, there's little new under the sun, right? These countries get strong generally under a strong, charismatic leader. So you have a king that comes to the throne, and he's powerful, and he's a go-getter, whatever, or he's very, you know, brutal, whatever. And he starts to campaign annually, and all of a sudden, he's building up his territory, he's building his power, and so the country expands. Then you have internal problems, right? The king dies. This is a very common one. The king dies, and there's quick, you know, people are trying to figure out who's going to be the next king, right? And so then there's this internal fighting. There's weakness in the country because there's no central strong leader, whatever. And now all these people that particularly are further off to the west, that this strong leader has been campaigning into their land every year and making them pay tribute. Well, they get news that shit's awry over in the court. And so they're like, I ain't paying them, because what are they going to do? They're weak now. They can't even get their own house together, right? So they throw off the shackles. And now they're not making tribute payments. And so now what does the king of Assyria have to do? He's got to, once he gets everything settled, he's got to then spend a bunch of money, take all his troops, go back out there and try to squash all that rebellion, right? So what you don't want to have happen if you're in power is to let your vassals know something's wrong.
Right.
And so you try to mitigate that. So this idea of the Assyrian king, you know, stepping up to the table, that's telling everybody, hey, Babylonia is not as strong as they used to be, right? And that's not something you want to project. Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry,
and
Pat.
Ashur-uballit, actually, he, in this text somewhere, I don't read this particular, I'm sure you could pick out the area, but he had a policy, it's somewhere in there called Make Assyria Great Again. It was like on hats and shit. And the whole thing, right?
That's right. That's right. That was good. That was really good.
Because he kind of did talk. He did talk a little bit bigger in this. A little bit I understand is he's projecting better than he is, but with some confidence that he is going to be able to pull this off.
He did say that he had the biggest brain, right?
The biggest brain, the best people.
The best people.
The best people. All right. So let's move on. And go ahead and throw your questions in the chat. Again, this isn't like a typical show, but we're just showing you, like, you've heard about the Amarna letters. Now you can look at one.
Yeah.
Read about it. There is, I just kind of want to give you an example. So I pulled it up in the reference section. There's there's one period, there's a couple different references given. And then there's a series of writings from the Metropolitan Museum that you could use to reference further. That's cross reference. Sometimes they only give one, but it's because it's what they're referencing has all the references in it. So you might have to dig around a little bit, but it's a reasonably good source. But again, this is one of the real ones, right? So when we say the Amarna period, this is something from that period. Yeah. Just like Noah's Ark, right? Just like that. Similar. I wanted to point out, I don't know if you noticed it, but we have a celebrity in the house. Biddy Buddha is here. In case everybody doesn't know, Biddy has set up an OnlyFans. And if that's okay for me to say, I think she'd be okay with me saying that. Sure. I was going to do one, but then somebody told me that the goal is to try to get people to sign up. So so I decided to nix that. But yeah. Exactly. Yeah. We don't want to do that. I'm quite sure. But no, you know, if you should definitely go sign up for Biddies. Yeah, this is one of those episodes where Josh can fucking not say, not my area of expertise.
Definitely not my area of expertise.
OnlyFans or Assyria?
Assyrian fans,
Okay,
I think is what it is. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. And again, throw any questions you have in the chat. We'll take some open questions at the end. You want me to go make this piece last?
No, it's okay. I mean,
Okay.
I don't have a lot to say about it. But if you want to introduce it, go for it.
So this is very descriptively called the figure of a man with an oryx, a monkey, and a leopard skin. 8th century BC, Assyrian. Now it's a statuette, ivory statuette that were in a cache of similar style found at, and I'm going to say this wrong, Fort Shalmaneser, which was part of a building in Nimrod, right? That was like a auxiliary fortification.
Yep.
Where the soldiers would have been. And this is kind of where they would have kept a lot of their booty and treasure. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And the nice thing about this, so this is again not my area of expertise, but from the research that I was able to pull on this, these were this statuette was a group of 6, I think, that were found under the niches.
It was 6, and it looks like they had deposition over them from probably a cataclysmic siege event.
That's right. I think they postulated that it might have been the fall of Assyria in the late 8th century, but I'm not sure. But this, as I understand it, is done in the a style of art that is not Assyrian, right? Which is useful to know.
Correct.
This is in like northern Syria, Phoenician. Actually, I think this piece, I looked on the website, and it's one that we should talk about. It's called ORAC. It's the ORACC, the open richly shit.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it stands for. Cuneiform culture, open, richly access cuneiform culture, something like that. But that's one of those sites that if you find something on ORAC, you can kind of lean into it.
And what I know about this piece, and the only reason I know I like this one, is this shows that even though this is found in Assyria, the origin spot is Phoenicia. So it shows how much stuff moved in the ancient world.
But that's one of the important things about this, right? Because if you think about what's going on at Fort Shalmaneser, these are foreigners. Like, this is supposed to be a depiction of a foreigner bringing exotic animals as tribute. This is the point, right? So having it be in this foreign style fits with what it's supposed to, what the piece is. And so actually I think this one might be Nubian.
I think so. There's some that are Phoenician, but it was in a cache that they think was in that region. But this is depicting a Nubian person. Whether or not it was created in Tyre or among Phoenicians, or again, it's depicting that type of person.
Yeah. But it's important because it's showing it's not only a foreign piece.
It's a foreigner.
But it's a foreigner who is depicted as bringing foreign things in as tribute. So I mean, actually, it's an interesting piece. But again, so much of this information, it's such a good starting point. Yeah, just look at the description, and it's such a good starting point.
And when we talk about, again, depicting other people of other nations, right? And then you're hearing references in maybe an ancient text that people are talking about people from these regions. You can see how people collectively saw these other people. And, it's not just the Assyrians depicting Nubians this way, other cultures, the Egyptians, other people are going to be some of these, a lot of these artistic representations are cross-cultural. Like, hey, it's like a Mesopotamian, someone from Assyria is talking to an Egyptian, goes, how do you draw your Nubians? And they go, this is how I do it. And then, but it becomes stylistic. So you can it helps us with the interpretation of a lot of stuff within the archaeological record.
There is actually Marion Feldman wrote a book, might have been her dissertation that got published, but I can't remember. But it's on, what is it that she called it? Like an international style, I think is what she called it. But at the site of Ugarit, there was a bunch of pieces that had artistic styles it was eclectic, right? So like I can't remember the details of it, but like some of the plants that were in the imagery had a more Egyptian feel, but then, this other aspect of it came more, from the western part of the Mediterranean and some of the other stuff. So it was bringing all these things together, and was during this period of international diplomacy.
I think I'm familiar with her book, and they were basically saying artists in modern Turkey, ancient Anatolia, were drawing plants they had never seen, but they'd seen them in other art, right? So there was what's Egypt? Well, I can draw Egypt, but I've never been there.
Yeah.
Right. How do you draw Egypt? Well, you put these plants there.
That's right.
Okay, that makes it Egypt, right? Or like, again, drawing a crocodile or carving a crocodile, and you've never seen one.
Right.
But it's been in other artwork. And so that, like, well, there's crocodiles in Egypt, so that's how you have to do it. And that's how you determine, like, you draw water in a crocodile, you're talking about Egypt. Just people understood that. So okay. And again, it's a beautiful piece, by the way. Just again, extremely old. Again, 3,000 years, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ivory. By the way, when researching this a long time ago, because I used this piece for something, I found it very interesting. People go, well, where'd they have to go to get that ivory? Where'd the Phoenicians get their ivory? Well, guess what? Until they were hunted in extinction, there were elephants in Syria. People forget that too. And so the Phoenicians over time have a harder and harder time getting ivory locally because they've hunted their elephants into extinction. So kind of maybe a little ecology moment. And this is the big mother.
So there are several of these out there. Trying to remember where this one came from.
I can tell you.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't remember which one this was.
This is... Oh, Pat, you didn't click that one. I got it. Hold on. I have it minimized down here.
Was it at Kalhu?
Well, I want to get the right one because I pulled up two different images and I'm going to say the wrong one, and then we're going to be embarrassed later. So, well, I'll be embarrassed. You won't.
I mean, as you're looking, I want to point out that nobody really fought me at all in the side chat on the OnlyFans thing, right? Like when I said I won't do that, nobody was like, "Oh no, you should." I just want to point that out, So I think I made the right call.
Yeah, this is from Kalu, and this is 9th century.
Yeah. So the site of Nimrod.
Mm-hmm.
And these are interesting divine, like winged bull, human head figures. They're usually put at entrances, or often put at entrances, like at gates, as like defensive things. One of the things that I find interesting, that doing a little digging, it was sort of a standard thing in the 9th and 8th centuries. If you count the legs, there's 5 of them. And I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, oh man, that's, maybe it's this sort of supernatural aspect. No, it's to show motion. So if you were to look at this from the side, like directly from the side, you would only see one front leg, and it would look like it was in stride moving forward. But if you looked at it directly from the front, it would just look like 4 legs, and it was just standing there firm.
And at the British Museum, they have 2 right next to it. Like you walk between 2 of them. Yep. The great thing is you can, if you're going there and you know about this, it's fascinating to look at the artistic. When you walk from the front, it looks normal, and as you pan around the side, it plays a trick on your eye. You still only see 4, even though you stop and you can count 5. Your eye wants to think of it as 4 because you're like, wait, no, but I'm seeing that leg that's behind the other leg. I'm just seeing them in tandem.
Right.
Right. And then by the time you've eclipsed it, there's 4 again on the side. So
Yeah.
it's just fascinatingly exquisite
Yeah.
in style and form. I'm getting all.
No. It's really cool. And like, if you, again, that's something that if you pick up something like this, actually, there was another image.
And there's a book like that at the British Museum that is and I think it's the same author, but a newer version, the art of Assyria. So you can sometimes at museums, you can go and say, hey, this is the reference source, and get a PDF image of it or PDF of it. Or maybe if you really want that book that's going to have all of this art in it. Again, museums often have good reference materials that are available for, purchase. So that's important to remember too.
Yeah, so here's another picture of a different Lamassu bull. Again, you can see the 5 legs, but notice the same sort of thing is happening in this image. The horse. Oh.
Yep.
So, yeah. Just thought that was an interesting thing to point out.
Well, that's the difference between, like, if you're trying to figure out a region where something comes from, and all you have is a piece, right? And you're like, yeah, it's got 5 legs. That's definitely not Greek. If you just have legs, right? It looks like a horse or a bull, but you only have the lower torso. You can start making some.
And if you look at the horned headdress, that is a divine symbol. So you can look at, sorry, Ox. I guess I do have a couple books. But if you have the horned headdress, it's a sign of divinity, right? So when you look at iconography, you can say that's a divine figure. It's wearing the horned helmet. So that means when Naram Sin is wearing the horned helmet in his victory stele, it's like, oh, well, that's very significant that a king is wearing the horned helmet because they're showing him to be divine.
Right. And it's similar to iconography you see in Egypt. It's similar to later Hellenistic, like after Alexander the Great, we have, the imagery of horns, right? After he's made Pharaoh of Egypt and his pilgrimage to Siwa, right? Like this is important stuff. Again, associated with the Egyptian god Amun, right? So, all right. Well, anything else about this piece is awesome?
I mean, there's an inscription on it.
Right.
Actually, sorry, I will point out one more thing. There's a game, if anybody's watched Irving Finkel, is a very, very famous Assyriologist, but there's the game called the Game of Ur. And actually Megan used to make them. I think she's got a new design that she'll use with the Glowforge, but she can actually make this. It's a box, and it's got little what are they called? Little flowers, rosettes or whatever on it. Anyway, there's one that was inscribed on one of these winged bulls near the feet. Like I think it was behind the front legs, and it was like
a doodle.
Guards would like sit and play the Game of Ur
on the back of a divine statue.
Yeah, like on the base. I think it's the one at the British Museum because I think that's the one that Finkel was talking about. But definitely go watch this
because there's an additional inscription there talking about. I don't remember seeing it on there, but there's an inscription about guards would routinely like stand at these entrances, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's and sometimes commit vandalism, but it's cool. It's all good. So, but these pieces are absolutely fantastic, and they're stunning to see in person. But if you can't get there, you can go to the Met, and you can look at these pieces, and then you can go to the British Museum, see what they have, and look at these. And again, divined caricatures of part human, part animal, with big, huge wings. And then you go look at the earliest depictions on like how a angel is described in the Old Testament, and it's just like a round ball with eyes and a bunch of wings, right?
And then you realize that it's aliens.
Right. It's aliens, definitely aliens. All right. I think that's it for the slides. And I think now if we want to, we can take some questions if anybody has any.
Did we want to talk about Sennacheribs? Oh, that's right, because you couldn't get a picture of that.
I couldn't get a picture of it, but I did want to say, like, one of the questions Josh and I get asked a lot is about, like, hey, let's talk about, like, when the conquest of, you know, Israel and then Judea happens and all that. Well, the Met has entire, I guess, article. And they basically go through this one's written by because they ask smart people to write this shit. They always list who writes it. Ira Spar wrote this article. He's a curator there, and he writes about, like, why these later texts, and I couldn't pull the picture up, but there's an 8-sided column. Yeah, if you can get a copy of it. It's an 8-sided column written that describes what happens to King Hezekiah, and basically when he becomes king, and Sargon dies, what happens, and then how the revolt occurs, and then his son comes to power and has to deal with a bunch of people that succeed. And by the way, just to put things in biblical perspective, restoring order to Judea was so low on the list that all these other major states had to be placated first, pacified from rebellion. And and again, it's order of importance. One of the last places he goes to restore order is Palestine, because he's got an army. When he shows up, it's like, yeah, his army's all polished. They've been on campaign. Their military prowess is undeniable. And there's this depiction on this tablet, I guess, series of it's a column, cited though, and you can read all about it. And it's, you know, it's in the British Museum, and there's other ones like this throughout the. So
I shared one. Yeah, it's not this one, right? This is the one that's in the British Museum,
right?
But it looks a lot like this. And if you zoom in, I love the quality of this picture. But you can see the cuneiform here, and
Josh has a book on how to read cuneiform. You can actually purchase it online.
That is true. That is true. Sorry, how do I stop screen? There it is. So the one that we're talking about in the Met, this is, sorry, I was just trying to close that out. Again, it's very, very similar. What happens is when a king, remember how I was talking earlier that kings go on campaigns, right? When kings get strong, one of the things that they do is they start to campaign out. And oftentimes what that does is that just takes them, for example, out to the west and through the land of Syria, Palestine. And what they're doing is they're going up to all these little vassal states that they have and essentially doing like a show of force and collecting tribute and making sure that they're staying loyal and not rebelling. And so they do that annually or semi-annually or whatever. And what happens is there are times that these areas rebel, and so they have to do a campaign that's much more forceful, right? And what they will do is they'll write about it in these inscriptions. So you have these things called royal inscriptions. So this is the book, one of the books I was telling you about. This is the Rhinap series, the royal inscriptions of the Neo-Assyrian period. This one has the inscriptions of Sargon II in it. You can see that it's not a small book,
and it's only covering a 16-year period.
Yeah, it's and they're just because there are tons of these royal inscriptions, right? This is volume 2. So these are not inexpensive. However, Actually, I can probably share my screen again and do this because this would be useful to see. Here is share screen.
And I just want to point out, we haven't had one Christian apologist tonight. That's pretty good. I think the Met collection like scare them.
It may very well may. All right, that should be, I think I shared it. Yeah. So this is the ORAC. I think you can see that maybe up here. I don't know.
Yeah. It's ORAC search.
There you go. Open, richly annotated
Cuneiform
culture. I don't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's your stuff.
No. Okay. So we're looking at the inscriptions now of Sennacherib. So here you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to click on that, now it shows you all of the inscriptions of Sennacherib that we have. Now, the one that you see that we're talking about in the Met Museum is number 17. And they call it the King Prism. If you look,
it's got translation. That's really nice.
So here's the cuneiform, right? The transliteration of the cuneiform, and then here's the English translation of it. So there are a couple things that I just wanted to kind of scroll through this, but there's some things that I highlighted that can everybody read that or no?
It's a little small, but that's good.
Yep. Okay. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things, right? Here we go. Sennacherib, great king, strong king, king of the world. This is all very standard. King of Assyria, king of the four corners. Capable shepherd. Guardian of truth, who loves justice. Renders assistance, goes to the aid of the weak, and strives after good deeds.
Perfect man. Virile warrior.
Now, the thing is, like, you could read this, and if I were an Assyrian apologist, I would be like, "Oh, see, look at what the king he's a social justice person, right? And look at this. Who is he fighting against? The bridle that controls the insubmissive. These are people that rebel against Asher, right? The god Asher. And look at this. The god Asher, the great mountain, granted to me unrivaled sovereignty. He is God's chosen, right? I mean, if we're just going with what the text says, I mean, yeah. But of course, we wouldn't do that, right? But when we come to the Old Testament, all of a sudden, you know, like the critical thinking goes away, and it's like, oh, I mean, it says that he's trying to be really righteous and a good shepherd, and so that must be true. What?
Well, and if you go down to the next little bit, he talks about next coming up is the campaigns he does. And you notice he's taking on his biggest actual dangerous rivals first. This in the first campaign, these first couple campaigns are against serious military powers, and he starts defeating them. Simultaneously, you may have heard again, we're talking about Hezekiah, right? And Hezekiah is going to be getting some revelation from, again, supposedly Isaiah, right? So in the kingdom, there's Hezekiah's people are watching this Assyrian king going around and just stomping the shit out of the greatest powers that rose up against him. And they're this little itty bitty tiny speck, right? They're not, they're the Luxembourg of Europe for all intents and purposes. And maybe, well, we'll give them, they're Serbia, right? But they're watching these big powers get knocked down pretty handily. And these conquests are very destructive in some instances. In some cases, there's capitulation, not a big war. Other cases, there's armed conflict. So all Isaiah, again, if you follow the biblical story, is watching the big bully beat everybody down. And then he's looking at Israel or Judea, King Hezekiah, and says, yeah, what are you going to do? And so miraculously, Isaiah predicts, hey, by the way, because you're unrighteous now, bad things are going to happen because you're next on the list. And there's no avoiding it at this point. Like there was no way Isaiah could be wrong when he said, yeah, bad things are going to happen, because everybody else had gotten stomped already.
This is why the Ezekiel prophecy in Ezekiel 26 is so meaningful, because it's exactly what Ezekiel was doing. Ezekiel just watched, the destruction and taking of captives in 587, 586 in Jerusalem, and the attention was being turned toward Tyre.
Right.
And so it's not like it was going to be some big surprise that Nebuchadnezzar went to Tyre. Because it was just the next logical thing to happen here. That's why it was such a surprise that he didn't take it.
Right. It was the military blunder.
Yeah.
It was and again, it's not talking very good. It shows how resilient Tyre was, right? But it also shows Nebuchadnezzar wasn't prepared for that military campaign against Tyre. Tyre's like, yeah, we're gonna just do this whole, we got a beach and an ocean between you and me, and we're good. Right. That's
so yeah, let's look at it a little bit. So let me give you a little bit of background just about this. What's going on with Sennacherib? So Sennacherib's a Neo-Assyrian king. Right at the end of the 8th century, comes to power, and he is sort of fighting the legacy or the way that his father dealt with Babylonia to the south. So just very, very quickly, I won't do a whole lesson here. I talk about this in some detail in volume 1 in the history section. But Assyria is in the north, Mesopotamia, Babylonia is in the south. Babylonia is made up of like 3 major groups. You have Arameans, you have Chaldeans, you have the old Babylonians, like the native Babylonians, but then you have these outside groups that have kind of come in and settled. But it's a very diverse place that's down there. And so, but there's some really, really sacred cities, some sacred shrines down there. And Babylonia is a very, very important place from a religious standpoint. And so, Sennacherib is trying to maintain that. But what ends up happening is you get these rebellions that are taking place in the south, down in Babylonia. And so Sennacherib spends his first 4 years or so, at least, trying to just put down this uprising that's taking place in the south. Well, that, again, I talked about it earlier, sends up a flag to everybody off to the west, all these little kingdoms off to the west. Hey, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Neo-Assyrian Empire, they're held up, right? They got problems at home. And so what ends up happening is you get these kingdoms that start to form little coalitions. So Hezekiah forms one with, I think, the king of Ashkelon. I don't remember.
He does. And that doesn't go well for the people of Ashkelon. And by the way, just so you know, when all these hostages are taken, the royal family of Ashkelon and it was these Philistines get taken too. It's not just,
right,
the people, the Hebrews, right? This was what they did. They took hostages and they took the royal elites out of their country, so there's no one to rebel. I think he takes his wife, the Philistine king, his wife, his kids, and his court, which that's a lot of people. That's everybody. That's the government, basically. And I think it's so. It's interesting that Hezekiah, we all talk about what he could have done to avoid war. He actually took as a hostage a king who was loyal to Assyria when all the other kings were like, hey, I think his name was Poti, right? Mm-hmm. He takes King Poti hostage. Now, that's an open act of rebellion against Assyria. He's a loyal vassal, and you've taken him hostage in an anti-Assyrian coalition.
Yeah, let's just paint that picture. So, again, you've got a picture that you've got these little powers sort of all over the place, right? In the southern Levant. So, Edom, Moab, these different Philistine sites, whatever. And so let's say you've got like something happens here. Sennacherib's in the Neo-Syrian Empire. He's all, held up at home. And so all the people are like, hey, let's rebel. Right. And it's like, it's you picture that the Life of Brian movie, right? Where the Brian says, no, you're all individuals. And they all say in unison, we're all individuals. And then the one guy in the back goes, I'm not. Right. That's what's happening here, right? So you have this pro-Assyrian king, vassal king, and he's like, but I don't want to rebel. And now it's like, wait a minute, you can't have one of them. Like, you've got to get that army as well. Like, you can't have somebody that's like going to help them out. So then what do? Well, you go and you take them hostage, right? And okay, so here's what happened. Let me just I've come down here to this is the line 58 of side 2 of the prism. So on my third campaign, I marched to the land Hatti. So this is like the Syro-Palestine area. So he starts off with Tyre, the Sidon area. Fear of my lordly brilliance overwhelmed Luli. That's the king. The king of the city of Sidon. And he fled afar into the midst of the sea and disappeared. This was like kings in Tyre and Sidon in this area. They realized that, sieges don't go great for them. So like the king of Tyre, he realizes that it's going to suck out there on that island during this siege. So what does he do? He's already gone through this. He's like, I'm out. I'm going to go to Cyprus. I might lose some land control, which he does. Notice what he loses here. The awesome terror of the weapon of the god Asher, my lord, overwhelmed the great cities, or the cities Great Sidon, Lesser Sidon, Bitsidi, Sarepta, blah, blah, blah. Notice this one. Ushu. If anybody's read my chapter or watched my videos on the prophecy of Tyre, that is the mainland city of Ushu. Notice that it's one of a list of cities that fell. It's just in one campaign. So I point that out because you remember that somebody theorized that Ushu held out Nebuchadnezzar for 15 years or 13 years and then finally fell after 13 years. Now, this is one of the cities that fell in that campaign. So, right. So I wanted to point that out. So this is the campaign. So he's gone off to the west. He's fought this area, entire side in this area. And now we come down to, okay. So here he comes down. There's Padi, the king of Ekron that went off, with Hezekiah to Judah. And so he gets him back. But notice that I'm like, there's the name Hezekiah, right? Mm-hmm.
And
so
it is Hezekiah. Like,
yeah, that's right.
This verifies, this is one of those extra biblical sources, right? Yeah. Hezekiah was the king, but Hezekiah is in this one, not the good guy. Padi is. If you know, he talks about the loyalty of Padi.
That's right. So here I brought out Padi, their king, from the city Jerusalem and placed him, on the lordly throne over them. Then I imposed upon him payment of my overlordship. Then, moreover, as for Hezekiah, here it is, right, of the land of Judah, who had not submitted to my yoke, I surrounded and conquered 46 of his 45 walled cities and smaller settlements in their environs, which were without number. Anyway, so he lays siege to them, right? Were there really 46 cities? Probably not. It's probably exaggeration, but whatever. As for him, Hezekiah, I confined him inside the city Jerusalem, his royal city, like a bird in a cage. If you haven't heard that, that's where that comes from. Or if you have heard it, I set up blockades against him. So here, I mean, this is describing the siege, right? And of course, in the end, he doesn't actually defeat Hezekiah. He gets tribute from them and then goes back home. There's, speculation about why that might be. We don't have to get into that now. But yeah, these things are actually really, really useful.
Well, and I do think
Yeah, go
that
ahead.
important too is like you go down a little bit because I was reading this one before since
Hmm.
we were going to talk about it. Hezekiah gives away a lot of his family. Like, I hate to say it, like we don't know if the singers, the male and female singers, were like temple personnel, but probably either court singers. But this is like Hezekiah is like giving him slaves too. Like, it's not just he's like, you know, you didn't want your role to come up when this peace treaty was made, because this was a capitulation.
Yeah.
Like, you got to give me a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's borne out in the biblical sources as well. This is one of the reasons Hezekiah is like, well, I got to give in, but I remain king. And he did whatever he needed to do to survive this siege.
Yeah.
Because, you know, but he did give, you know, if 800 talents of silver is no small amount of money for a small king at this time.
So I mean, this stuff is really useful. And again, that site is free. You could go there right now. Google ORAC, ORACC, and you know you can click through all that stuff. And
this is the kind of thing that an apologist or someone who's not informed is going to have no idea. You just ask them, well, can you explain to me this cuneiform inscription at this place, why it's talking about the same event in a totally different way, right? And you know, explain, we have two sources and they totally conflict. So one actually appears to have happened because this kingdom was defeated. So again, you got to look at the historical weighing of both those. Is it as the Old Testament says it happened? No. Is it like this particular stele or column? Probably not either. It's somewhere in between. I'm sure that Sennacherib was he probably would have wanted to take Jerusalem by force, but it was politically and military more expedient to take after this he'd just been kicking everybody else's ass. His army was probably tired. So
yeah, I mean, and you think about what Hezekiah did. Again, you've got a period where there's weakness. There's weakness in the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And so that allows freedom for Hezekiah to, like, you know, what is it that if you've watched Lord of the Rings, right? When Rohan goes down to Helm's Deep, they're setting up fortifications, they're bracing the gate, they're, you know, whatever. That's what Hezekiah did. So Hezekiah does stuff like he reinforces the main wall, he builds an additional wall outside the city to bring in more people from the like the hinterlands. He builds the Siloam tunnel to get water in. Like, there are things that he does to outlast a siege. And that was the point.
And he had time enough to do it too, because there were more important people that had to be dealt with.
That's exactly right. And that's part of a siege, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody knows this, but it's not cheap to keep your soldiers out there around the city. It's expensive. And so if you can outlast them, right?
And this is important too. This is how they maintain their limited sovereignty as a vassal. Like, when it walked away, nothing had changed except there was more gold in Assyria's coffers. And there were hostages now from out the Levant, Philistine, Hebrew, like all these people had been subjugated, like, again. And the king of Tyre had to flee to Cyprus. Like that, and these are all borne out with extra biblical sources, which again give you a more robust understanding of the region. So when you read the Old Testament, you're like, yeah, but we know it really happened on this tablet, or at least we have another account.
Yeah. The historiography it's not an easy task, right? And this is why you can't just open your Bible, read the text, and say, well, it says it, therefore this is how it happened. It just doesn't work that way.
And Hezekiah is really not seen as a rebel in the Old Testament, right? He's unrighteous. If he would have been righteous, then it would have worked out for the kingdom, right? Judah would have been, you know, thrown off these yokes of these evil oppressors, but for the wickedness of the people.
Right? Yeah, I mean, you just always have to ask the question, what is the text doing, right? What is the position that it's trying to set up? What is the picture it's trying to paint? And text do things. They all do.
Yep. So if we have some questions, let's go ahead and get to those because we've been here a while. Gurr asked, question for Pat or Dr. Josh, can you read out loud I Sofa King Seal E? Don't know what the hell that is.
Is it I'm so fucking lazy?
Shh, I wasn't gonna.
Oh, sorry. It's just
I thought it was silly. I'm so fucking silly.
Oh, silly. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
But you know, Gurr, he's got to be Gurr.
Yeah.
You know, she ain't throwing up no fucking super chats though. Just that fucking cheap boy, fucking cheap speak comments. Like again, native atheist. Yeah, that's the guy. Also, we will be working on a show for. We only had one person want to sponsor an episode. We're working on that. It's not the easiest ask, and we want to do good by the scholarship and maybe get another someone a specialist on. So we'll be working on that. But keep up to date. And if there aren't any more questions, we'll give you a minute or two. But this is kind of we wanted to kind of let you guys know what we do. Like I call up Josh and he goes, "Hey, did you see this?" I go, "No." Then he sends me a link, and then we spend 2 hours talking about the shit we just researched. And then people will like ask us, "Well, where'd you get all this information?" We go to these same sources. Like I send him links to the Met. Like, "Hey, do you read this?" Like it's pretty much.
What is your go-to text for HMS scholarship? Huh. Yeah, that one's tough. If you're asking, I suspect he is. If you're asking for like the most up-to-date resources for secondary literature, like who has written about this text the most recently, it's something that's tough in the field. There is a bibliography, like a massive bibliography that was started by somebody in Tübingen, and I'd have to go look for it because I've become sort of set in the topics that I work on.
Right.
And so I know them off the top of my head now. But if you ask me to do something new, I'd probably have to dig that back up. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking more basic, if you're looking for something historical, for example, usually the first place that I'd want to go is Mark van der Meerop, right? He's got a book, I think 2007 was the latest edition of it, called History of the Ancient Near East. He usually footnotes things really well. He can get you going in the right direction. It's pretty up to date. But ORAC is actually a really good place to go. They've got a lot of secondary literature listed there.
There's a lot of handbooks too. There's, both Cambridge and Oxford and Yale.
Yes.
There's a lot of really good handbooks. And I hate to say it, but sometimes they repeat the same stuff. But when you buy a handbook, you're getting a chapter that gives you an introduction, but you're looking for that reference citation because it's like 10 pages of, Nineveh and then 10 pages of all the research. Yeah.
And that's exactly right. There's a reference work actually, and also you'd probably be interested in this. There's a book. Shit. You know what? I'm going to go pull it off my shelf.
Yeah, pull it up. But like, for example, the Oxford Handbook on Cuneiform Culture is kind of like my go-to because I'm not a specialist in it. So I use handbooks outside my specialty in a much more general way. Like Josh needs, if you're looking at the secondary literature that is, the serious stuff, there's journals. I know, and Josh can maybe remind me of the name of it, but there is a publication by the University of Chicago's Institute for Oriental Studies has like an Assyriology and Mesopotamia, like they have these specialized databases. What's the University of Chicago's database? Oh, Josh doesn't have his headphones on yet. Josh, what's the University of Chicago's database? I know they have one too, right? On Assyriology?
Yeah, from the Oriental Institute.
I've used it before, but I forget the name of it. But it's another good resource.
This guy, Handbook of Gods and Goddesses in the Ancient Near East. This is one that probably a lot of people watching would be very interested in. It's 2020.
Yeah.
2021.
Well, then if we're gonna another one that's good for what we're talking about is this book. Canaan, Israel, and Antiquity. Introduction is a good starter book for like I started there with Noel.
Yep.
Again,
Got that on my shelf.
These are kind of the starting points because it's not my area of specialty, so I start with that and then dig in down the way I want to go.
But if you look, like, okay, here's an entry for the god. You probably can't see it. There's an entry here for on. Yeah, you can't see that. I don't know how to do this. But at the end, oh boy,
I see it.
Yeah, there's a list. Oops, I guess it's over here. Maybe it's over here.
Yep.
I can't tell. Of secondary literature. So it's like C. Foster, 2005. But it's just an entry. It's like an encyclopedia entry.
Right.
But it gives you a list of all the secondary literature. And this is through 2021. Right. So it's very, very recent. And this is dealing with all the gods and goddesses. So if you were looking for Enki, right? Or if you wanted to.
My boy.
Everybody loves Enki. Or here's El, right? The Ugaritic deity. It has its own entry in all the secondary literature.
Well, you know that El is completely unrelated to Elohim.
Of course.
And Elohim singular every time it's used.
So no doubt.
We have a question. Thoughts about the influence of
Esarhaddon Succession Treaty
on Deuteronomy?
Yep.
I'm sure you got this, or perhaps.
Yeah. So the Esarhaddon Succession Treaty. Esarhaddon was the Neo-Assyrian king who remember how I was talking about Pat, you know this, but for the audience, that the difficulty sometimes of finding a successor or having the right person named or whatever. So what Esarhaddon, the Esarhaddon Succession Treaty was essentially saying, look, when I die, my son's going to come to the throne. You're going to sign this treaty. This vassal state's going to sign this treaty saying you agree to serve him and to love him and to do everything that you can to support him. And here are all the curses that are going to follow if you don't. Here are the blessings that will occur if you do. And it was noted in scholarship quite a while ago, I don't remember when, that there was overlap, a lot of continuity between the Esarhaddon Succession Treaty and what we see in the Book of Deuteronomy. So yes, I mean, it's not my area of expertise. I think a really great resource to look into that is the Oxford Handbook to the Pentateuch that just came out. That Jeffrey Stackert and
they
Joel
do an
Baden.
Analysis of it.
Yeah, it's and of course, actually, the person that wrote and worked on the Esarhaddon Succession Treaty most recently is Jacob Lowinger, who was one of my advisors, Megan's advisor at Hopkins. Brilliant scholar. He has a scathing review of his Kenneth Kitchens, I think, 2-volume work on covenants and treaties in the second millennium, and making the comparisons, trying to show how the biblical text fit into the second millennium. He has this scathing review. It's wonderful. Anyway, not that I take joy in those sorts of things, but I do. But yes, I think there's a definite connection there, and that's a place I would go. And there's a new commentary coming out on Deuteronomy. I want to say it's in the Hermenia series. Don't quote me on that, but it'll be good. I'm trying to remember who did it.
How do you spell his last name?
Which one?
Jacob.
Oh, it's a Lauinger. Close.
Yeah.
And we always went back and forth. Is it Lowinger? And it's like we never quite figured it out.
I've heard it's so since our names are kind of close, Since I'm low, they're Lao.
There you go.
At least everybody in my family says Lowinger, not Lowinger. What the fuck's that all about?
Man, idiots.
Sweet. Any other questions?
This has been good.
I see. This is the kind of stuff we could do all night. We could go back in the Met and just work with pieces. Like, again, comments. Neil made some good comments. Again, Walter Burkert's a little dated now. Neil, hit me up with an email. I'll send you some newer resources. Again, Mary Beard's, I'm a big fan. But there are a lot of more Burkert, his concept of a willing sacrifice, been a little challenged, by the way, as far as Greek sacrificial system. So we can talk about that later, but there's a lot of really good people out there. Owen Davies and a bunch of really good specialists. So, but hey, we want to not pander or prattle, not pander. We'll pander too for money, but we don't want to prattle. So, if there's no more questions, we're going to call it. And we thank you for joining us. And we'll
thank you all very much. It's
and
a lot of fun.
As always, can you dig it?
Yeah. This is for all you non-philosophizing black sheep, unwelcome, pushed to the side motherfuckers like me.
Fuck what they say. Tang gang. Atheist Your Way. Yeah. Fuck what they say. Tang gang. Atheist Your Way. Ha ha ha. Let's get down to business. These bitches got glitches. And you thought you'd dismiss us? Nah. Now I'm laughing in stitches. See, the problem be, it'll be a tragic travesty to come after me. So just know this is how we get down. Respect that shit like a pronoun, bitch. Yeah. Fuck what they say. Tang gang. Atheist Your Way. Yeah. And fuck what they say. Tang gang. Atheist Your Way. Yeah. Fuck what they say. Tang gang. Atheist Your Way. Yeah. Fuck what they say. Tang gang. Atheist Your Way.